We're live, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Okay, welcome everyone to this special meeting of the Transport for the North Board. We meet, of course, at an especially sad time, a period of national mourning, and we begin the meeting marking the sad passing of His Royal Highness Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. And I'm sure we would wish to recognise his lifetime of service to the Queen, to our country and to the Commonwealth. And I think we should now mark our respect for the Duke by observing a 1-minute silence as a mark of that respect. And that will start now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen of the board. That's the minute silence. Chairman, you're on mute.
Schoolboy mistake, James. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for observing that 1-minute silence for the Duke. Okay, we now move to our business of the day. Item 2, are there any declarations of interest in respect of this meeting? Thank you very much. Item 3 then is the Chief Executive appointment and interim arrangements. The appointments panel has identified Martin Tugwell as its preferred candidate for appointment as permanent Chief Executive. You've received details of Martin, and we have also identified Tim Wood as the appropriate interim CEO pending Martin's arrival. So those are our recommendations to this board for your consideration and approval. I will come to the board resolutions on each matter that we need to consider, but before I do that, let me just throw it open for any general comments or questions that any member would like to raise. Louise, please.
Thank you, John. Just to confirm, we had a really robust interview process. It was an excellent process. I know there was some sort of trepidation to start off with, but it went really well. We didn't come to a joint decision after the first round of interviews, so we did go to the second round, and we were unanimous then in terms of the decision to appoint Martin to the board, to the role of Chief Exec. One of the things I would say was he did make quite a lot of commitments during the interview, and I'm really keen that those commitments are taken on board as we move forward. But I'm really happy to support this document and look forward to working with him.
Thank you, Louise, and thank you for your support during the process of the appointments panel. Chris Burris, who was also a panel member.
Yeah, thank you. If I may, John, thank you very much. I would echo everything that Louise has just said. I think it was a very thorough process. If anyone wants to know in terms of time, I think the first day when we were interviewing the candidates was 9 hours and nearly 40 minutes. But I think we did, at the end of the day, after shortlisting, we came up with a unanimous decision. And I'm going to say it again, and I suspect the rest of the panel will agree with me. thank you for the very even-handed and excellent way in which you chaired what wasn't the easiest thing to do at remotely held, but I feel that we couldn't have done a more thorough job. Thank you very much, Jim.
Thank you, Chris, and your personal comments are much appreciated there. Liam Robinson, please.
Yeah, thanks, John. And obviously I'm substituting for Mayor Steve Rotherham today. He's just asked me to raise a few points and make a few comments, because first and foremost, very pleased to sort of support the report. It's great that we've identified an excellent candidate in Martin, and really looking forward to him joining the organisation. And we're very confident that in the interim, the organisation will be in the more than capable hands of Tim, looking after things until he arrives. But I think from Steve's perspective and the Liverpool City Region's perspective, we're really keen that kind of Martin can hit the ground running, because this is going to be a really crucial year for transport for the North, particularly with the sort of imminent landing of the integrated rail plan from government, which, if it can fulfil all the opportunities that we wanted to see in the North, could be fantastic. But if it doesn't actually deliver the things that are vital for the North, it could be a really tough and, dare I say, turbulent time over the months ahead. So it's really important to us that kind of Martin can kind of pick up the cudgels very quickly. So a couple of things we were going to suggest, if this would be helpful and kind of everything that people could potentially support, is that fully appreciate this transitional period, and Martin still has a notice period to serve. But if we could look to have one-to-one meetings with Martin for each of the board members, each of the mayors and leaders, as soon as is practically possible, that fits people's diaries, I think that's really important for all of us. I know it's vital for Steve, so Martin, as the new CEO, can understand all of our priorities. But secondarily, perhaps we also need to be thinking about how we're setting some kind of early objectives for Martin as a new chief executive, whether the General Purposes Committee might be the right place to send that, and particularly as a suggestion, do we want to ask Dawn as the HR director to perhaps pull together a bit of a report about how we could shape that could go to the next board meeting, so we can really crack on and make sure as soon as Martin joins the organisation, kind of we're straight into the sprint that we know we're going to have to do. So those are things we'd like to put forward from the Liverpool City region.
Thank you very much, Liam. Let me just come back on both of those as we go forward. The first, Louis already mentioned that one of the things that impressed us about Martin's candidature was he made a series of unprompted undertakings during his interview, and one of those was to do precisely what you're proposing, Liam, to get round all board members and to do that as quickly as possible, and if possible to do that, some of that at least, prior to his appointment. So I think prior to him taking up office, I should clarify, so far as he's able. So I think we get off to a good start on that one, Liam. And on your second point, this is of course covered in the paper in paragraph 3.8, and the proposal is that the work stream and working group on the General Purposes Committee address exactly this question of his objectives. So when we come to the board resolution, if we agree to that board resolution, that is indeed how that matter would be progressed as quickly as possible. Let me now come to Councillor Swinburne, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, John. Just a quick one, and I'm pleased to see this report as it is laid out. I must put praise onto the actual interviewing panel, because I think they've done a very good, robust activation on that, and I believe they've done a very, very good job on that. I'm just looking forward and reading into the report and reading about Martin, that he has got a wealth of experience that we're hoping he's going to be able to bring to this board and move us forward with the way that we have been, working in the past under Barry. Saying that, I think we must recommend or welcome that, this is going to be a very big shoes to fill from Barry. And I think it's important that we pass every sort of congratulations to Barry and wish him well for the future for what he has done for this board, and hope that the same sort of thing can be achieved with Martin. Thanks, John.
Thank you very much. The minutes of the March meeting will of course duly record quite an extensive session during which a number of members, Andy Burnham and others, made a number of very positive and well justified comments about the service from Barry White. I'm delighted to reiterate those today, and we'll minute them again. Thank you very much for starting that off. Can I come now to Dan Jarvis?
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, can I associate myself with your message of condolence for the sad loss of the Duke of Edinburgh? Can I also just reiterate what Stuart has said about Barry White? I think Barry has done an outstanding job. He will be greatly missed, and I'd like to place on record my personal thanks for the important work that he has done. Stuart's right, Barry will be a tough act to follow, and I'm very happy to support the recommendation today, and I look forward very much to working with Martin and to working with Tim in the interim. I do, though, completely agree with what Liam has just said. I think this is a critically important moment for Transport for the North, and I think there will be some big and difficult judgments that we will have to make potentially in the not too distant future. And therefore, I think the role of the Chief Exec is absolutely fundamentally important in all of that. So I completely reiterate what Liam just said about the importance of one-to-one meetings with Martin ahead of him taking up his appointment, and also the point about the General Purposes Committee. And I think, therefore, it would be very sensible and very helpful if the Director of HR did bring forward a paper to our next meeting in June that will enable the setting of probationary objectives for our new CO. I think that's the right way to proceed, and it would hopefully very usefully give him a clarity about what's expected from us as board members. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dan. Very helpful. Can I come back just to Louise? I think your hand's up, please, Louise.
Yeah, just really to a little bit more in detail about the interview. All of the candidates got a really thorough grilling into what would their priorities be in the first few months, and we emphasised over and over again the urgency of moving forward and getting things done, and all of the rest. And I'm confident that Martin will already be thinking about those things in terms of what he wants to do when he starts. And I think if that can be part of that role of the General Purposes Committee to come up with some short-term objectives. But we made it really, really clear to all candidates that, we expected someone just to get on and do it, basically. So I feel confident that Martin will be in the position to take that forward. And he was really keen to meet each of you, and he mentioned that in both interviews, to come out in his the next few months is to come out and meet everybody. So we'll keep him to his word.
Thank you, Louise. Mark Ralston.
Thank you, Chair, and may I just reiterate all of the comments that have been made, so I won't repeat those. Could I also just say that Barry has been a huge supporter of the LEP's input into Transport for the North, and has gone out of his way really to ensure that there has been a medium for achieving that. So a plea for the new chair just to carry on that role. And obviously, transport is a massive driver of economic regeneration and performance, and that message really needs to be reinforced with the new chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And you can imagine that was also a subject of discussion at interview. Stuart, back to Stuart.
Yeah, thanks, John. Just a quick one. And I say I'm not, as I've mentioned earlier, I'm not going to challenge what the appointment panel came up with. I think it's a very good decision, and they've worked very well at that. I'm just looking at 3.6 on the report, John, just to see about the interim or the probationary period of 6 months. And I'm just wondering, for example, what the actual probationary milestones and objectives have been laid out to Martin, what he is expected in that 6 month period, hopefully going forward with what the board has already been discussing and dealing with. But I'm just wondering, have they set any separate milestones for Martin to adhere to?
So, Stuart, not as yet, as Louise has indicated. I think we have all the basis of that and a great deal of common ground between us and the candidate as a result of 2 very full interviews. But I think that is the next stage to come to now, to crystallise it in the way that Liam proposed and others have supported, and we will do that. And when I come to the board resolutions, I'll just make sure we're clear what we're doing as a result of 4.1 little b, which is where we look at management arrangements once we've made the appointment. So we're on the cusp of that, Stuart, but I think it is critical that we proceed in the way that you describe. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem with that, John, and thank you very much. Thank you.
I'm just looking whether I have any other hands up. Please shout if I have missed anybody.
No further hands up or comments there, Chairman.
Thank you, James. Well, thank you all for your support for the appointment panel's recommendation and your very constructive and helpful suggestions as to how we proceed, and indeed for your thanks for the work that the appointments panel has conducted. It was a lengthy, as you've seen from the paper, a lengthy and robust process. We had a very good field of candidates. We did 2 rounds of interviews. We had psychometric testing, and we had, and I'd like to put on record my thanks to the stakeholder panel that also interviewed all of the candidates that we had shortlisted and helped us enormously in that regard. And then there was a very intense process of reaching the decision that we felt was most likely to deliver what, Andy, I think you mentioned at the last board meeting, somebody who would speak up for the North and was passionate about achieving that economic transformation agenda through transport on behalf of all the citizens of the North, Mark, that you identified as well. And we have confidence that we found the candidate who can do that, and clearly he has done a not dissimilar job in the Heart of England Economic Partnership, which gives him an advantage in being able to hit the ground running. If members have had a chance to raise any points that they wish to, then I will come to paragraph 4.1, which are the recommendations for the board for today. And little a is to approve the appointment of Martin Tugwell as permanent chief executive and head of paid service of Transport for the North, subject, of course, to completion of all required pre-employment and medical clearances. Do we have approval for that appointment?
Can I move that, Chairman?
Thank you very much, Chris. I see a number of hands up. Other Mark, Liam, thank you very much. Susan, much appreciated. Item B then is the management arrangements for the appointment. And in paragraph 3.8, it had been proposed by the executive that this be picked up quickly by the work stream and the working group, which is bringing back a proposal to the next board meeting for the role and membership of the General Purposes Committee. So we will wrap this into it and address in that way the points raised by Liam, by Dan, by Stuart, and by others. So the board will receive a further report, and obviously exec staff and myself as chair will also play whatever role we can in providing full support to Tim in the interim and to Martin preparing for his appointment. So on that basis, do we adopt the proposal that this be taken forward by the working group on the General Purposes Committee and a report brought back to the next meeting of this board? Do I
happy to move that as well, Chairman.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Chris, and others. And then finally, we have in item C the interim arrangements that we need to put in place to bridge the gap between Barry's departure on the 21st of April and the arrival of Martin at a date still to be finalised, but he was on 3 months' notice, so it's up to that date. I just need to make a slight change to the wording of the recommendation that you have in front of you, just for technical accuracy. Due diligence has been done since the paper was sent to you, but it's not a material change. A slight change is required to reflect the fact that Tim Wood would be acting chief executive and head of paid service between the 21st of April and the 15th of May, because during that period, Barry is completing his contract on annual leave, and then Tim would become interim CEO and head of paid service until such point as Martin joins us. So that is not a material change, but just for the record, it just reflects that 15th of May is the point at which Tim would move from his existing role as deputising for the CEO, therefore in an acting role, to being formally the interim CEO of this board. On that basis, are colleagues on the board prepared to support the proposal to appoint Tim Wood to hold the fort? Thank you. Thank you, Liam. Thank you, Andy. That's very helpful. And of course, we wish Martin well, but we also wish Tim well in holding the fort in that very important period when we may, as Dan, you identified at the last board meeting, we may possibly have the IRP to consider quite quickly. So we are well covered to do that. Thank you very much then for your support for the recommendations in item 3. Item 4, the governance report, has been brought forward by the monitoring officer to update you on the technical fact that virtual meetings would end on the 7th of May unless current legal determinations find that they are still legally compliant under existing regulations. And just to begin to sketch out what we may have to do if there isn't such a change. And obviously we will update the board as those legal proceedings move forward. It's a paper for note, but does anybody wish to ask any questions or make any comment before we note the paper? Susan Hinchcliffe.
Hi, it's just a remark that obviously you mentioned the IRP earlier, and it's a little bit concerned if our meetings are going to be disrupted, not to be able to have proper debate and consideration going forward. It's a bit tricky, isn't it, not having things in place as we are now, really.
So it is indeed, Susan. I am hopeful that common sense will prevail. I think it would be somewhat odd if virtual meetings of public bodies were not allowed at a time when coronavirus regulations were still in place and when the vaccination programme was not yet complete. But I suspect, let's just presume that Dan was right, that we do have the IRP by late May. In those circumstances, I would envisage the 9th of June meeting going ahead as a board call virtually for all board members with a full discussion of the IRP and indeed of any other matter, as Liam suggested, that we might need to consider. The only thing we would have to be entirely compliant of is the ability to make formal decisions. Now, I suspect if it's the IRP, it might be premature. It might be that we were having a second reading debate on the 9th, but we do have provisions under the Constitution for the Chief Executive to make decisions on behalf of the board on delegated matters. And there's already thinking from our monitoring officer as to how we could hold a formal decision-making meeting on a potentially hybrid basis. So you're absolutely right, Susan. It is somewhat of concern. The paper was really there to assure you that the executive team are preparing for all contingencies. Okay, does that satisfy members? We'll note the report and await further update then on the status of our 9th of June meeting. Thank you very much. I move then, I'll take items 5 and 7 together. Any business which the chair is satisfied as urgent. This was put on the agenda as a contingency in case there was any additional matters that we needed to discuss. I have no such matters, and as a result, I am not needing to move item 6, which would be the exclusion of the press and the public. Let me give the floor to Andy Burnham, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I don't wish to detain everybody long, but I do just want to reflect on a meeting of the Rail North Committee that was held this morning. And just to register a concern that is more than a concern, I guess, a frustration that it has been made apparent to us that the options that we consulted on for the May 22 timetable were not deliverable options. And I think a number of members felt frustrated this morning about the position that we have been put in. And further, an alternative option has been put forward, which hasn't been fully modelled or indeed considered from its economic impact. And it's just to say, Chair, that I think we need better than this from the rail industry. In any of our worlds, if we went out to consult on options that weren't deliverable, we would rightly be heavily criticised for wasting people's time. And it just isn't acceptable to me that 3 years on from the chaos of May 2018, we are in a position where there's no clarity about the thinking around a workable timetable, nor is there any clarity still about an infrastructure plan for central Manchester that would actually fix these things long term. And if I were to put together the two elements that were presented to us this morning, from what I heard, there is no prospect of a fix to the infrastructure that would actually fix the timetable until the early 2030s. So in effect, we were being asked this morning to sign off a reduced timetable for our residents for a decade. And personally, I don't find that in any way acceptable. I do not believe the rail industry is prioritising the north of England, as the Secretary of State has called on people to do, to accelerate change in the north of England. That cannot be the case if problems with level crossings in Cheshire have only just emerged in respect of the Transport for Wales service. If there was a focus on this, these issues would have been raised pre-consultation, pre the development of any options to go out to consultation. And I think this is embarrassing, actually, for the rail industry to put forward non-workable options in a major public consultation that lots of people have given them plenty of time to, for then, at this stage, for us to be told, well, none of it was even doable in the first place. There is the further concern that the Northern Rail's objections to the options in terms of their deliverability relates to the fact in terms of accessibility of rolling stock and drivers. Well, that either should have been known, or if it's an issue of cost and they won't be paid for, well, that too should be in the public domain, and then we should know the reasons why these options now are not deliverable. So, Chair, I'm sorry to delay the meeting and bring in a negative note, but I don't believe the rail industry is treating this organisation or this board with the respect it deserves with regard to the quality of the work that is being putting forward, particularly when that work is going out to public consultation. And I cannot believe 3 years on from the timetable chaos, we are looking at a decade of a much reduced timetable in large parts of Greater Manchester and the North. That is simply not acceptable to me, and as I heard this morning, other members of the Rail North Committee, and I believe it just needed to be said at this meeting today, because we're going to go into a phase now where we need to see acceleration of ambitions with regard to the government's levelling up agenda, and it feels to me that the rail industry is not in any way in a position to match those ambitions around levelling up, and things need to change. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andy, for bringing that to our attention. Before I respond, can I just ask, because I'm unsighted, was any action agreed by the Rail Committee on behalf of TfN at the meeting that we would be pursuing as a result of the meeting?
Thank you, John, and maybe other members of the committee might want to comment as well with their impressions, and the Chair is obviously on this meeting as well, who very skillfully chaired the meeting this morning. Yes, I put forward a proposal that we ask for a one-item agenda meeting of the Northern Transport Acceleration Council to get the focus into this issue, both the timetable but also the infrastructure. Because without the infrastructure, this timetable becomes effectively a permanent timetable for the North. And, yes, so there was an outcome, and I think it was agreed. There was a suggestion a letter should go today, and that was a satisfactory outcome to me, Chair. So thank you for prompting me.
Thank you very much, Andy. Sorry, I hadn't caught up with that over lunchtime today. Let me come to Liam then, and then Stuart, and then Dan. Liam first.
Yeah, thanks ever so much, John, and completely agree and echo everything that Andy's said. it's marginally better than May 18 in the sense that nothing's been agreed to be implemented, but quite frankly, it's unacceptable, the fact that kind of 3 years on, we've still got these problems rumbling round. And the worst bit about it is there's no indicative timescale of how infrastructure in central Manchester is going to be fixed. And, there's a premise that kind of let's consult on how we change train services when actually the kind of long-term solution isn't being wrestled with. This has rumbled round the too difficult box for over a decade now, and we're basically being told that it will remain unsolved in its kind of full form for another decade. That just is not good enough. So as well as Andy's suggestion in terms of writing to the Secretary of State around this, I think members felt there's a really important need to have a very detailed lobbying strategy around this, because it's obviously seen as a very sensitive issue in the Department for Transport, obviously seen as a very expensive issue by the Treasury. But actually in the North, it's a necessary issue that needs to be properly addressed. And we need to make sure that kind of across government, not just within the Department for Transport, it's given the seriousness that is required. And this shouldn't be an either-or conversation either, because this is one of a number of key component parts. It's the first component part, in my view, for improving the railways across the North, but this shouldn't be at the expense of Northern Powerhouse Rail or TransPennine Route Upgrade. They are all the component building blocks that the North of England's rail network needs for the North of England's economy, environment and its community to flourish in the future in the way that we want it to. So at least we haven't got to a stage where we've been forced into making a wrong choice. But quite frankly, it's not acceptable that it's got to this stage. And at the very starting point, we need to make sure that kind of it's raised with the Secretary of State, but also raised even higher in government to make sure it's addressed. In the same way, frankly, we were able to address the hated pacer trains. This has to be dealt with in exactly the same manner.
Thank you very much, Liam. Stuart, then Dan, and then I'll come to Susan.
Yeah, thanks, John. And I'd just like to echo everything that Liam and Andy have said. And I'll keep this brief, John, because you can obviously see the frustration in Andy, and it's understandable, and and it's not acceptable. And I'm so disappointed that this has arisen, in the state that it has. And Andy is quite right that we should be doing something more robust about this. I mean, he's saying about a letter being sent. I would also hope that Transport for the North can also issue a strong letter in support of what Andy has been saying. And I think it should come from this board as well, how unacceptable this situation has got us in. And I hope that we would move forward in support of what Andy and Liam have been saying. Totally agree with Andy. And I feel for you, Andy, on your frustration, mate.
Okay, thank you very much. Dan?
Thank you, Chair. Look, I'll be very brief. I completely agree with what Andy, Liam and Stuart have said. It is an unacceptable state of affairs that we find ourselves really in the deeply invidious position of not having confidence in the process of a body of work that has rumbled on for far too long. So this is an urgent matter. It does require the urgent attention of senior people within government, and therefore I think it is the right thing for us to do as a matter of urgency to write to the Secretary of State for Transport, but I'm mindful of the fact that this requires the attention of other government ministers as well. And I also very much agree with what Andy said about the role here for the Northern Transport Acceleration Council. The council was created precisely to address the issues that we find ourselves dealing with at the moment. So in addition to the letter going forward, hopefully as a matter of urgency, I hope that we will be able to convene the council to discuss this matter with the Secretary of State and others at the earliest available opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan, and then I'll come to Chris.
Yes, just backing up what Liam Robinson said really about it just illustrates the wider point about the investment that is so needed in the north of England to improve our rail infrastructure, not just on a local basis, but on an intra-city connectivity across the north as well. And government need to demonstrate that they are serious about putting that long-term investment in place. And obviously the IRP, we've mentioned a couple of times already in this conversation, is key to that. But obviously this is a building block as well as part of that strategy. But it just shows how much there is needed and how much investment is needed, and the solutions need to be found to solve the problems that our residents expect us to solve.
Thank you, Susan. Point well made. Chris?
Apart from endorsing what everyone else has just said, what worries me too is that, as we know, it's only just recently, but within the last few years, that we finally paid off the debt we incurred fighting the Second World War. We have a one-off opportunity now, the Levelling Up agenda, to seek some serious capital funding to invest in the economic and transport future for the northern, dare we say, the northern 40% half of the country. If we get this one wrong, and this opportunity to get very scarce resources on a significant scale is only going to be there for a short time, or else we'll be batting and faffling around for decades rather than years. I think it's extremely urgent that we get this one absolutely right, and I back every single thing Andy, Liam and everyone else has said. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Chris. Is that everyone who wants to contribute? Well, Andy, thank you for raising this matter. It's deeply disappointing that this morning's meeting was left in that position. I've been watching this in parallel to the committee. The Chief Executive wrote on behalf of the committee after the last committee's meeting, did he not, Liam, to demand more information so that your committee was in a position to make clear choices. And then the rail director had to change the nature of this morning's meeting because we were not yet able to have assurance on a number of factors. So the fact that we've now still ended up disappointed and frustrated by the inability to get what we need is of great concern. So can I give the floor to Barry White? Barry, there's an action there to write to the Secretary of State from the board. Is there anything else you can tell us?
John, just that I have a meeting set up this afternoon with some officer to look at that particular issue to get a letter issued at the earliest possible stage. So we will follow through on that. And the strength of feeling was very self-evident in this morning's discussion, and actually it was very helpful to hear that strength of feeling, and I think it registered with the industry at that meeting as well.
Will that be your last activity then, Barry?
Yes, that'll be my last, just about that last activity, and then I'm actually going to walk the Pennine Way thereafter. So once hotels open up, I'm going to take a long walk on the Pennine Way. So starting in Edale, Dan, not far from Sheffield. So.
Well, we may be having to walk the Pennine Way if we can't get the trains running properly. Okay, well, thanks again, Andy, for bringing that to front and centre. It's important we had that, and I think it should be helpful, Liam, to the Rail Committee to have the support of the wider board and to capture the actions that Barry will take in his last few days in office, ending on yet another high. And as Andy said, slightly sadly, ending, Barry, where you began, with problems with timetable. And we continue to fight the good fight on this very important matter. Okay, I think then that has completed our business for today, unless there is AOB. Looking at the chat bar, people wishing Barry a very nice walk. Let me then just repeat my and our thanks to you, Barry, for your excellent service over the last 3 years to Transport for the North, and to extend our very best wishes for not only your Pennine Walk, but more importantly, perhaps your future plans. And Barry, let me just give the final word to yourself.
John, all I'd like to say very briefly is a big thank you to all of the board and to you as chair. It's been an absolute honour and pleasure working with you all. And I think what Liam said earlier is absolutely right, and Louise as well. You know, the next few months are going to be absolutely crucial with the integrated rail plan and indeed the issue that we've just discussed as well. So there's a lot to play for, and I will watch with great interest to see how the integrated rail plan as it emerges, and I hope that it does give that transformational investment that the North so badly needs and deserves, actually, as well. So I wish you all the best and thank you all for your support and every success for the future to Transport for the North and to all its member authorities and board members. So thank you, John.
Let's end by giving Barry a round of applause. And I see lots of handshaking there in fond farewell, Barry. But you have a lot to do between now and the middle of next week. Okay. Important stuff. Thanks for a good board meeting. Thank you for members for convening at short notice. And again, thanks to all of my colleagues on the appointments panel for the hard work they and the staff put in. We look forward to new leadership, big shoes to fill, moving forward, hopefully positively. I'll call the meeting to a close here and we'll meet in one guise or another on the 9th of June. Thank you very much and goodbye.